nice to be here amongst all of you. And actually, I started off my life as a novelist, and that is what I had intended to do always. And subsequently, I said that I had to become a journalist because that's the only way I could support my fictional writing. And so it was by default that I became a journalist. And now my life keeps alternating between fiction and journalism. And the journalism itself became so interesting along the way. I worked in various publications, India Today, Express, Down to Earth, Outlook magazine. And in sometime in about 2000, me and Tarun Tejpal and Minty Tejpal, we got the bug to sort of become media entrepreneurs ourselves and start a media organization because we were getting bored with mainstream media. We were not pushing the envelope enough in the jobs that we had. And so we decided to try our luck with raising some venture funding. We reached Bombay and we had some set-up meetings with some venture capitalists. Ambit was amongst one of them. And over the course of a meeting, and on the strength of the idea of Tehelka and the team behind it, the Ambit person got up and valued our idea at $8 million at that time in February of 2000. And that is how we got started. We never gave our mandate to Ambit. We went to First Global because they were more down-to-earth people and we had a better emotional connect with them. And that is how Tehelka's journey started in 2000 of February, March. And to Tehelka, I mean, we have to understand the journey from Tehelka to Cobrapost to understand how we have arrived where we are at this present point of time. So we wanted to push the envelope, as I said, and we said that our work should speak about us. We will not spend the money on advertising. It was a dot-com boom, if all of you are aware of that era. People were splurging front page ads. There was this site called India.com that had like 4 or 5 front page ads on Times of India, and they were like spending maybe half of their budgets on advertising just to get known. We never spent a single money. We did stories. We did investigative stories, whether document-based, later RTI-based, hidden camera, etc., etc. One of our first stories then was about match fixing in cricket. It's now, everybody assumes that the journey was simple. It wasn't simple. When me and Krishna Prasad first broke the story in Outlook magazine in 1997, people were skeptical. They said that we are flying a kite. So it never really struck resonance. And then we kept on breaking stories till we are where we are now, where every 6 months perhaps there's a story coming out. Then of course we did Operation West End, which all of you would be familiar about, which is about corruption and defense procurement in India, which then the defense minister George Fernandes and the president of the Bharatiya Janata Party, Bangaru Lakshman, had to resign on that story. And obviously, we then dealt with the power and might of the Indian state. We realized that doing an investigative story is not that simple today. I mean, in those days and even now. So then started the process of us learning about what the state could do to an organization when that organization ran up against that state, especially if the organization was small, with little to no resources, with just a battle of wits between the founders of the organization and a mighty state on the hand. So we had to cope with a judicial inquiry whose only purpose was to sort of somehow find fault with what we had done. It was not interested in what we had found or the various instances of corrupt practices that even our story told them about. They were only interested in hunting down the whistleblowers. We had to cope with the people who had invested in our company going behind bars for the simple fact of having invested in Tehelka. We had to cope with one of our reporters being thrown in jail on a trumped-up poaching charge. We had to cope with the government hunting us down as on various false charges. The Official Secrets Act case, they put a false case against us for spoiling India's relationship with the Dutch on an alleged story we were supposed to have done in Tehelka in October 2000. They sort of scared away our investors. They scared away the people who worked with us. And in short, it became difficult to survive as an organization. I spent nearly a month on the witness stand in Justice Venkateswamy Commission of Inquiry, answering about 30-40 lawyers, questioning me about the story. So in independent India's history since 1947, the Tehelka story, Operation West End, became the most scrutinized, asked story, most examined story ever in Indian history, in the sense of lawyers poking the holes, why did you do this, why did you do that, all with the strength of insight. But the story survived. The story survived because it's true, it was all there on camera, and there was nothing wrong with the story. It was a great story. It was a great story because for the first time at an intersection of history, we managed to put together a documentary showing corruption visually. For the first time, the people of India came to know what is corruption audio visually on screen, and it made a big impact. So subsequently, basically the attrition process, but then coping only takes you to a point. I mean, we had to cope even with income tax officers questioning us about whether we had deducted TDS on the money which Bangaru Lakshman took from us. We had to cope with the income tax officer asking us whether the bribe was tax deductible or not. I mean, the monies that various politicians had taken. So there was a bit of farcical sort of context to all this. Subsequently, but there was a lot of sort of personal satisfaction at various levels. I remember a story that a friend of mine told me from Bangalore immediately after we broke Operation West End in Tehelka. She said that she was walking the streets of Bangalore and she overheard two women laborers talking to each other, and the senior amongst them was explaining to the other. And imagine talking in Kannada about 4 days after Operation West End was broken, and she was explaining what she thought Tehelka was. And she said that Tehelka was this machine they had made in Delhi, and if you stand in front of it, the machine will tell you how much corruption you have done in your life. So there were stories like this. I mean, we lived for this, and we really found that really, to us, those were great moments of inspiration. And I remember a similar story like that. A few employees of Tehelka were traveling in a bus, and there was a dispute between a passenger and a conductor over the fare. The passenger felt that he was being overcharged over a particular journey, and he got down shouting that I'll report this to Tehelka. So it brought us, because we had caught the public imagination, we had to live up to it, and in that sense. But the attrition process of battling a state with little or no resources, with second round investors drying up, though we were a compelling story at that point of time. We were a compelling story in terms of traffic to our website. We were a compelling story in terms of branding that we had created, and we were quite a compelling story in terms of the revenue till that point that we are pulling out. But for fear of the state, that the state would get annoyed if they invested in us, so it became a big problem to sort of attract investors for us. And so I parted ways with Tehelka. I was more focused on investigative journalism, and I didn't want this whole commercial aspect of it. So I left Tehelka in 2003 and started Cobrapost. At that time, my second book had come, Bunker 13. So it allowed me a bit of financial independence to do what I did. And initially, I didn't want to start another media organization, but the ferocity with which the state came after me, I thought that if I am not hedged myself with a media organization, I would be nowhere. So Cobrapost started with a simple thought of protection for myself. It had no grand ideas of that I would be doing investigative journalism on a grand scale. It was a simple news aggregation site. And the simple purpose with which it was started was pretty sort of normal. I mean, I would say less than normal. It was that I didn't want to be an ex-journalist. I didn't want to work in mainstream. So I started Cobrapost just as an aggregation site, just to remain a journalist in some way, and just to get the protection, the notional protection of being a journalist in India. I mean, whatever protection that comes to you with that. So with that in mind, I started Cobrapost. And then, sillily enough, sometime in 2005, I wrote a column in Hindustan Times where I castigated India TV for using the hidden camera for their story called The Casting Couch. I said that the hidden camera can be used only on the rarest of rare occasions, and you should use it for stories which are of eminently great public interest. And then I mentioned some story ideas about what they should be using the hidden camera for. And one of the story ideas I suggested was that you should be using it, which I keep hearing about parliamentarians taking money to ask questions in the Indian Parliament. You should use the hidden camera to expose something like a malpractice like that. And so within a few days of writing that column, I got a notice from the Indian Parliament. Somnath Chatterjee was the speaker, and he sort of sent me a notice saying that you are casting aspersions on the Indian Parliament, and you have to reply to that notice, and the speaker has tremendous powers. So that really provoked us to go and do that story, just to show to them that, look, what we had just said by way of a column. So the origin was pretty sort of, again, it was organic origin of a story like that. And subsequently, we went on to do several stories. I'm not going to bore you with all the stuff that we have done. We basically did these stories as a for-profit production house, which was in alliance with some channel or the other at various points of time, whether it was Aastak or Star TV or Network 18. And there are hundreds and hundreds of stories that we have done, but I'll just show you a brief collection of it just for you to get an aroma for those stories. Is it working? Yeah. Now, this is a story that we did in collaboration with Open Magazine. This is about an investigation to which finds the Orissa state government ministers misusing their discretionary quota to allot lands to judges, bureaucrats and officers, land which was meant to go to handicapped people, to people, war widows, etc. And this is land allotted in Orissa across, by discretionary quota, which is basically violating all constitutional principles. This is in Japan. When the tsunami hit them, we went because India has had a very tremendous sort of ancient connection with Japan, so we felt that we had to sort of see how the Japanese people were coping up with the tsunami. This is a story again, cricket match fixing, about bookies and how they sort of manipulate the system. This is my travels in Iraq, Wages of Fear, where Indian drivers were taken hostage in Iraq in 2004-05, and some people say ransom was paid to release them, some say no, but that's part of the story. Duryodhan I already talked to you about, which started organically from a notice from the Indian speaker, but you should understand the other significance of this story, which is 11 MPs who did in fact were expelled from the Indian Parliament, and that accountability, a journalistic story bringing that accountability, had never happened in the Indian context. That when they were caught, they were all expelled from the Parliament, and there were like 11 MPs, 10 from the Lok Sabha and 1 from the Rajya Sabha. So historically, even though it was challenged in Supreme Court, and then subsequently there was a prosecution launched against us, but it all stood in court. And in that sense, it is historic for the accountability it brought into the system, because we all think that the politicians are high and mighty and no one really sort of gets at them if they are doing something wrong. But here was a story which proved what they were doing, that they were doing wrong, and then finally the wheels did turn and some action did happen. Of course, there are a lot of social stories we do. This is about how basically a lot of eunuchs in Delhi were basically, males were turned into eunuchs in a sense to force them to go into this sort of state of being. How Muslims find it difficult to get houses, rent houses in India across several states, 4-5 states. A reporter went pretending to be a Muslim and recorded what all he had to face, and there was no way that he could ever rent anything in these 4-5 states. This is about godmen, the various godmen that you keep hearing about in the Indian context, asking for, willing to convert your donation and convert that money into white for you. So basically, money laundering sort of institutes that various godmen across India sort of force themselves. This is about religious misconduct. This is about Maulvis in UP and Bihar, willing of Deoband school, etc., willing to issue fatwas for money, which is basically against all religious principles. They would issue you fatwas like it is haram to watch TV, it is haram to use a smartphone, it is haram to take polio drops. So we just wanted to take out the absurdity of all of this fatwas that you keep hearing in that sense. And after our story, the impact that it created in that region, people started believing that, okay, fine, even this can be bought, so let us not take that all too seriously. Babies, how babies are being sold for money across Western UP from hospitals. It created processes in place after our story and to make it much more difficult for people to do it. A lot of cases were launched against the people who were doing this. Human organs for sale, that's self-explanatory. It's a controlled thing. This is something which is Mission Manmohan, which we did for Star. For the first time, we got on video suicide bombers planning an attack. They were planning an attack against Prime Minister Manmohan Singh when he was visiting Jammu and Kashmir. And we caught them a few weeks, we got this video of how they were planning this attack. They were attending a wedding. They were one of them was turning into a Sardar, putting the makeup for it. They were joking amongst themselves, making fun, and then subsequently they did the attack, but they were killed in an encounter close to the venue of Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. So this is the first time ever you got suicide bombers who were planning before they really went and did their attack. Arms for sale across Bihar, where it is AK-47 or the police rifle or the Magnum or the Katta. It was all available. It is all available for a price. Misdirected Naxals. This is about how the nexus between the Naxals in Nepal and India and how they were recruiting women and children to their organization, and the children at a very low age. Of course, at this point, I'll take a break. This is basically at this point or subsequently after this. We did hundreds of other stories. This was just to give you an idea of our range that we exhibited during this time. But we realized that there came a point of realization for me in last year, 2013, around the time, February, March, that we did our banking story, which is Operation Red Spider, where we caught 28 banks across the country who were willing to use their branches for laundering your money. Subsequently, it went into an investigation and the RBI found all of them guilty, and the RBI gave them the quantum of fines that the RBI issued against them ranged from 2 crores to 5 crores to 50 lakhs, which had never happened in Indian history. Earlier, the RBI used to fine banks 2 lakhs, 1 lakh, 50,000. So the quantum of fines really went up. It proved that there was something wrong systematically with the system. And now I'm very proud to say that a lot of stories have come out which are saying that because of our story, insurance mis-selling has really come down a lot, because there have been processes in place in banks, in branches, where you cannot really mis-sell insurance, and you cannot really go in there like you used to be able to go in there with wads of cash and saying, please make it white, and they would tell you how processes of how you could do that. At this point, basically, Operation Red Spider, the slide is not here. We decided that none of the channels wanted to partner with us on that story, because the channels have commercial interest, they have sponsors, they have advertising money coming in from banks. They said that we won't be partnering with you on this story, which is at that point I realized that I have to turn non-profit. There were many stories before this also which never saw light of the day because it sort of interfered with the TRP process of the channels. And now, of course, if you go about with a big commercial story which would hurt their advertisers, sponsors, and the people who took loans from, so it became a big no-no. So we decided at this point to turn non-profit. Non-profit as a model is there in North America and Europe, which is basically that you do get investigative stories, but you are funded in a non-profit way from philanthropy, from donations, and you have your own revenue model. You go directly to the people and say that if you want to investigate this story will cost us X amount of money. So whoever wants this story to be investigated, please sort of come and donate. So they have these various models in place, and which is what the road that we decided to take. And since we turned non-profit last year, the few stories that we have done since then, One of them is again Falcon Claw, which is about 10 odd MPs, around 10 MPs in India, willing to write letters of recommendation for a fake non-existing Australian oil company, MPs of Parliament, which is basically that they are selling their sort of souls for a non-existent Australian mining and oil company for oil exploration. Nothing much happened in this story, which is again, I mean, there was no action like we saw in Operation Duryodhan, where 11 MPs were expelled from Indian Parliament, which is just to show you that if the noise is not enough and the politicians survive the first spin cycle, we are not really a country of rule of law. We can get away with doing murder if we have the right lawyers and the right money. I mean, there are a lot of cases like this. So we somehow have not deepened our democracy enough. We did a story, Blue Virus, before the elections about how politicians and parties were misusing the social media. There are these plethora of social media companies who would for a sum of money defame your enemy. They would generate fake likes. They would generate fake Twitter followers for you. So we exposed this before the elections. Of course, one of the big stories that we did this year was Janbhoomi. All of you are history students would remember that in 1992, Babri Masjid was brought down by a bunch of Hindu fundamentalists. The CBI then filed charges against a whole bunch of them, and the whole case is going on in Faizabad and UP. And we went and talked to about 23 of them who were charge sheeted and what they had to say, and we sort of proved that it was a criminal conspiracy hatched beforehand and nothing spontaneous which they would like us to believe that the mob just gathered and did it. It was all a preordained, it was a pre-planned conspiracy to go ahead and do this. The Stalkers, it was a story again about a tape which we got about instructions which were being passed to a police officer in Gujarat about tracking a particular woman. 84, which is again an investigation into the anti-Sikh program in Delhi in 1984, and how the officers who were manning crucial posts at that time, what they had to talk about the riots and who they felt was behind it, and how they were compromised and how they didn't do things which they should have done. Now, it's been a sort of long journey for me in the sense of just a few days back, if some of you saw newspaper reports, we broke the story about how Walmart, Carrefour and Metro, the big shopping sort of conglomerates across the globe and who are in India on a wholesale license, they are basically doing retail on that license, which they are not allowed to do. We just broke this story and we collaborated with the Hindustan Times on that through a press conference. So which is just 2 days back on the 20th. And in a few days, we are again going to be breaking some story. But it's just take you, before I wind up and maybe show you a few little collage of some videos. I mean, at the end of it, what is Cobrapost? Cobrapost funnels the bulk of its resources into investigative reporting. Our tail to teeth ratio in a news channel, if you see, the news gathering budget in a news channel would be just 3 to 4% of the total operating budget. For us, the entire budget, perhaps 90% of it goes into news gathering, and we don't do normal sort of run-of-the-mill, President Obama is coming to India. We do investigations. Why are investigations necessary in India? We are the whistleblowers. We tell you the way we are. We tell you what our society is about. We are the antibiotics in the system. We are what we put the system on guard. We are the whistleblowers. Tomorrow, if you think that we are the first point in the system which alerts you that something is wrong within your system. And if there are less of us, there is less of democracy. Please understand that. We deepen democracy. In India, rule of law is still not what all of us desire to be. Rule of law has to be deepened in India. We have to deepen democracy. And in order for democracy to be deepened, in order for us to have more rule of law, in order for us as a developing nation, for our resources to go in the right direction, for the resources not to be misutilized, we need hundreds of whistleblowers. We need hundreds of Cobraposts. I mean, we need non-profit magazines in this campus. We need a lot of you to focus on what is going wrong around your own immediate area of vicinity. We need antibiotics flowing into the system, and that is what Cobrapost does it to you at a very small level. We are a very small organization, but the stories that we choose catch the public imagination, and so we amplify what we do through how we do it and our ideas and what we do. Thank you very much. I'll just play a little video for you.
करके उल्टाया, जिस टाइम गरम गरम पानी गिरा इसके अंदर, उस टाइम बाबा अल्लाह मियाँ
cannot take action against them. It's a big question now.
हमारा सिर्फ कन्वर्ट हो जाए, वाइट हो जाए हमारा, बस
White.
प्लस बाकी मिल रहा है हमको, और क्या चाहिए?
बस उसके ना white हो जाए.
लोग नष्ट हो जाएं, इससे को कोई मतलब नहीं. इनको मतलब पैसा मिले, कुर्सी मिले.
घोषणा कर रहे थे ढांचा तोड़, इसलिए कि हमने आप लोगों को ढांचा तोड़ने के लिए बुलाया, वो ढांचा टूट गया.
શું સાહેબને માહિતી તો મળે જ છે, પછી આપણું ચિત્રો દેખાય.
જી જી સર.
તો તમે જરા
હું હમણાં જઉં છું સર, હું પણ આટો મારી લઉં છું.
એકવાર જોઈ લો ને તમે.
હું જઈને જઉં છું, નજીક જ છું સર, પહોંચું છું, 10 મિનિટમાં પહોંચી જઉં છું.
एक कोट कर दीजिए सर, 50 तो ज़्यादा है, इतना मैंने सर खुल के बता दिया आप.